supply goes low, and then price can go up. If the demand goes high because everybody is euphoric, price can go up, and vice versa. So if there's balance, we are in a range. As soon as we get out of the balance, we can trend until we find another balance, and that thing stays no matter what technological advancement is there. So you can trade it on higher time frames, you can trade it on smaller time frames. I do both in the stocks campus. All right, algos don't matter, and price action defines everything for me. So market structure is simply a subsection of price action. Volume is part of the price action as well. I don't really look at volume that much, but still, divergence is the same thing. Are things moving as they do usually, or if there's something happening? All of it is simply subsections or categories of price action. Price action stays the same, and it applies to stocks, it applies to crypto, it applies everywhere.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree. Ty Evan, GM. I've been trading strictly crypto at the moment, but I've been interested in getting into stocks lately. If I wanted to invest in stocks for long term and stick to trading crypto in the shorter term, is this a good approach? Would it be beneficial for me to join the stocks campus, or should I stick to just crypto trading? Would love both your opinions on this. It's definitely beneficial to join the campus if you want to know anything about stocks. I guess maybe what Ayush has just said earlier, though, might be, would you say you're maybe not in the camp of long term investing over the next year or so?
Yeah, I
And
would
what do you
say
expect for 25?
long term investing is probably not the best way to go in 2025. But again, if you know how to trade trends, right? Like even in crypto, you have to know when price breaks out of a range in order to start going directionally, because that's where most of the money is made. As long as you know that, you will know when the stocks are ready again to break out. So 2023, 2024 has been a nice trend. All right. It's been a directional move for stocks for the most part on the larger time frames. We will need a longer consolidation in 2025, that you will know when to invest for long term again once that consolidation has happened on the weekly or the monthly charts.
Yeah, exactly. Psychram, GM. Uh, Questions. I would love to hear Professor Ayush's thoughts about GameStop. You've probably answered this 1,000 times in your campus, like how Prof. Michael has talked about XRP. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that stock. Um,
It's
so,
a meme stock. It's a pump and dump. It's gonna pump from time to time, but then get dumped again because there's just so much overhead supply. There's so many trap buyers. There's so many frustrated. What are this? The frustrated virgin versus a Chad someone, right? There's just so many frustrated retards in it that it's never gonna be able to go to the recent highs that it saw or anything higher than that. The narrative is gonna keep growing. There's always gonna be some guy who's hopeful about that short squeeze that never comes. Same thing happened with Volkswagen in 2008. It never came back, right? Like once guys get trapped, that's it. There's nothing left. They're gonna sell as soon as price tries to bounce.
yeah, absolutely. And the same thing, like that, if you look at Doge versus GME, they're basically the same thing. They had their massive blow up in 2021, and they probably can never reach those heights in terms of attention again. That was like a, lightning in a bottle moment. What are your thoughts on the shift of money going into crypto from stock markets, or distribution of money is good in the various markets? Yeah, I think we covered that already. I think money will flow from stocks over into crypto most likely. And lastly, do you hold any Bitcoin, Professor Ayush?
I do quite a bit.
Jay.
I've been holding it since March of 2023 when we came above the 50-week moving average, and I will keep holding until it closes below the 50-week moving average. Or
Nice.
if it gets to 100K, I will probably take partials there.
Nice. Perfect. Orange pill Chad. GM, Prof. Michael, and Prof. Ayush. Question for Blue Belt beginning in trading here. Is stock and crypto traded the same way with the same systematic strategies and systems? Yes. The answer is yes, yeah. Like price action is price action, TA is TA. Anything you're learning about technical analysis in crypto did not originate in crypto, right? Crypto's only 10 years old, roughly, for most stuff, for alts anyway. All of this stuff existed way before that, and it was from the stock market predominantly. So, yeah. Musty G, GM. Top 5 advice for first bull, GM. I'll go one better, bro. I'll send you a lesson I have. 8 things I wish I knew when I started trading. So you don't get 5, you get 8. I would check that out, that video. But any specific advice you have, Ayush? Maybe not 5, but just your top advice for someone in their first bowl.
I would say once the momentum runs out, like have specific criteria where you're gonna get out no matter what. because usually people anchor when price is going up. People usually start anchoring their expectations. So let's say you're a guy who started with $10,000. You get crazy lucky, or like your hard work pays off in the bull cycle. At one point your portfolio is at 90K or 100K. Now what you're going to do is you're going to start anchoring your expectations to that. So when market pulls back or starts to go down, and price goes to 70K, and you know the trend is over, price will starts to go lower, you're like, there will be another bounce, I will sell on a lower high.
Yeah.
And then you never sell on a lower high, price keeps going back, you forget that you're still up 7x from your initial investment. You start thinking you're at a loss from that 90 or 100K anchor that you have set for yourself. And that's the worst thing you can do, because then you're going to give back all your gains. In the market, if you are there for long enough, almost every single person makes a decent amount of money at one point. The problem is most of them give it back, right? You see that on Wall Street bets all the time. Like, the retards are there because at one point they did get lucky, they did make money. Most of them don't hold on to that money. So your job is to have that specific criteria that no matter what, if this criteria hits, I'm going to get out. I don't care if the bull run still remains. If this criteria hits, I'm out. It's that simple. And that's how you have to have that criteria already prepared in advance, because you're not going to do it when you're euphoric, when you have all the emotions running through you.
Yeah, 100%. And don't revise your targets upwards, right? It's like no matter how much your portfolio grows, you always want it to go just that bit more, just that bit more. Couldn't agree more. If you see it go to 100 and it goes back to 70, don't wait for it to go back to 95 or 90 or 80. Understand if the trend is over, it's over. And if you're up 7x instead of 10x, you've still crushed it. Yeah. Ethan, GM, you've already asked me this question, so I'd love to hear Ayush's opinion on it. As AI is becoming more relevant, how are your thoughts on AI in the market? How is your approach towards AI stocks, and what's your opinion on a long term? Um, what's your opinion on the long term for, well, short and long term, I guess, on AI?
I guess I just went on the rant about this, right? Talking about
Mm-hmm.
that book on how markets haven't changed over hundreds of years, and
Yep.
probably the same before that. It doesn't matter if it's AI giving the order, if it's a human giving the order, if it's a dog giving the order, it doesn't matter, right? As long as there's a buyer and there's a seller, and one side has to be aggressive for the price to move, as long as that exists, price will move in a similar way, because the AI has to also make decisions based on something. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how many of you guys know how AI operates, but you have a basic code that's fed a lot of data, and you have something that it's optimizing towards. So the more data you have, what it's going to do is going to run that process on the data it has, then iterate, right? Like then improve based on the objective it wants to get, and keep doing that over and over again until it gets closer to the objective.
Yep.
So that's what you're doing. It's that simple. And you need to give it an objective, which is probably making a decision about buying or selling a stock. You have to give it a certain baseline on what that decision is being made. And you're feeding it data, which is going to be historical data,
Yes.
right? So just because the term AI sounds fancy doesn't mean it's doing anything fancy, doesn't mean it's going to change the market itself. Same way computers didn't do it, algos didn't do it, right? Like when I was working in Chicago, the system was making decisions, trading decisions in microseconds. It was 60 microseconds from the time we would get our the we would send our sorry, we'll get the information from the exchange and we'll send them what we are supposed to do. 60 microseconds. And our programmers were trying to shave some of that as well. And yet the markets are moving the same way they used to move 100 years ago when there were no computers.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter, right? Like AI is not going to change the way price moves.
Yeah. Just a different form of just a different form of execution. It's all trained on the past, same thing, right? And um, AI is not new, right? And specifically, you're talking like machine learning. That's been in markets for decades, and it's getting better and better and better, right? But it's not. It didn't just start whenever ChatGPT came out, right? The big firms have always been using it and have pioneered it. So it's yeah, markets aren't going to stop moving. Uh, Oh yeah, and another question: do you have an opinion AI could be able to actually trade on the markets in the future at some point, or do you think this isn't possible? It already does. That's what machine learning is. So many of these AI based systems update themselves, right? So yeah, that already happens. Adam G, GM. If a bank like BNY accepts and approves BTC as an asset and forces or allows the rest of the banks around the world to hold BTC under certain conditions in their asset held books. How could this change the entire banking system that is based on fractional reserve? In my opinion and the knowledge I have, this will fundamentally change the entire banking system because banks will have assets that cannot be made anymore, cannot be printed. This fundamentally changes the system. And this change will be followed by changes that can be predicted in the entire system, but there will also be many unforeseen changes. What could be the change resulting in the introduction of Bitcoin to banks? I think that this change people who know finances like we do here will be able to understand what's happening in the system, and thus they will only earn money. People who don't understand will lose more. So, what do you think about Bitcoin going onto banks or getting more into the banking system? How it would change it?
I would say it's not going to change that much because at the end of the day, the governments are going to have a Bitcoin part of their reserves, right? Banks can use it. I don't really see the whole purpose of banks once, right? Like it's going to be a balance. Why do we need banks if all they're doing is holding Bitcoin, right? For the most part, for all crypto transactions, they want to keep it decentralized. So that's not going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
And if if the banks are using Bitcoin similar to how they use reserve currencies right now, then it's not going to change anything. And if they start using it in a different capacity, we cannot see it in advance. So it's a question that's hypothetical. We It's very hard to predict the second and third order effects of decisions made in the future, right? So it's very hard to predict a smartphone when you first saw a phone come out in early 2000s, right? It's very hard to predict how technology develops. It's very hard to see how internet would be now in 20, let's say 2010, compared to when it started to become hot in early 1990s. So the same thing. I don't really see a way of us knowing exactly how the introduction of Bitcoin in a complex system like the banking industry is going to play out. And we don't really need to know either.
Yeah. And like banks, they only like think back to the start. Banks were first created to store um, currencies and store reserves. So if you imagine like back when gold backed the currency, you needed banks because everybody couldn't keep the gold in their house. They had to have it, somewhere that was secure and safe, and then they issued notes against it. Bitcoin doesn't need that, right? Bitcoin has no weight. It doesn't need to be stored. It can be transferred, across cyberspace. So I don't know. I think it's like Ayush says, nobody really knows, but it doesn't need to be held or kept in the same way as a physical commodity backing something. So also, they're not going to go, not going to go anytime soon to a Bitcoin reserve. They're going to continue with the fiat scam as long as they can, I'm sure. Asar asking about a chart. We'll not do random chart requests. Tiger White, what's the best crypto to ape in with 100x leverage?
It has to be what is Pepe. Go for it.
Market
100x right now.
100x Pepe liquidated by the end of the stream.
Exactly.
Uh, Profs, do you know much about MSTX and MSTU? They are 2x and 1.75x leverage MicroStrategy. In the UK, it's a great way to invest into your pension, being tied to the price of Bitcoin. However, those two seem to be not available. Only MSTR is. In order to invest, so you know if it's something that can be done by a private broker. Definitely not one
I,
for.
I would say it's not worth it to try and invest in a leveraged stock because they usually have a negative drift. So even the guys in the stocks campus, I tell them if you're trading leveraged ETFs or leveraged stocks, do that for short term. If you're trying to invest something for even a 1 month or something farther out, don't take the leveraged stuff. So I don't suggest doing MSTX or MSTU. If you do want to add some leverage, let's say you put 90% of your portfolio in the stock itself, and then you buy, like, use 10% of it to buy options like leaps that are 1.5 years out, something along those lines. So you can leverage that way. But I would not suggest doing long-term investing with MSTX, MSTU, or anything leveraged in general.
Yeah. So MSTR is up like 12x from the bear market lows. It's already leveraged Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
Bitcoin's only up like 4x. So yeah, I wouldn't add leverage on top. Adam asking to tagging Mr. Robot, Ace, and Arno for some reason. So I guess we're not going to do that one. Abu, GM, would love to see how Prof. Ayush uses the SVP indicator. Do you use
What's
volume profile?
SVP?
Session volume profile?
I don't use it.
There you go. Asher, GM. This question has been answered by now, but specifically regarding using price action principles we learned in crypto for stock trading. I tried it after learning both campuses. Things we're back. Um, yeah, this is something I talk about. Stocks are not traded 24/7. Yes, you have to account for gaps, and obviously the charts look different. So, how would you handle that, Ayush? The difference of stocks not being open 24/7 versus crypto?
I would say you simply account for it in your system as well. I know crypto has some action in the Asian markets, but for the most part, crypto is also mostly active during the US session. So, unless there's a major news event coming out, unless there's like some major event that happens overnight, which is rare, usually the stock gaps are not insane. You simply account for it in your system, right? And worst case scenario, when price opens, you simply get kicked out at the market open. And I it's very rare that you would have a gap more than 2 or 3% without any news. So you're simply aware of the news, earnings, things like that, and then you include that risk in your system. There's no other way to do it. And then
Yep,
you when the gap happens, I simply look at the top and the bottom of the gap as as potential levels, and that's it.
absolutely. Question two: can you give a quick overview of how you handle taxes? Nope. We are not tax advisors. We don't live in the same country, and everyone's tax situation is going to be individual, unique to them, based on your own, your own setup.